Jonathan had imagined many ways his engagement could fall apart, but nothing prepared him for the message that flashed onto his screen that night. Emily, the woman he planned to marry, simply wrote that she was keeping the ring and that he should consider it payment for her wasted time. No explanation. No apology. Just a declaration that turned a symbol of love into a financial transaction. Jonathan stared at the message, feeling a mix of disbelief and calm resignation, then typed two simple words: "Fair enough." But behind that quiet response was a decision that would send Emily's life spiraling. Because if she insisted on calling the ring a payment, then the government would agree, meaning taxes, penalties, and consequences she had no idea were coming. And within hours, her phone would start blowing up as everything she thought she controlled slipped completely out of her hands. Jonathan didn't react immediately after Emily's message. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the words, "payment for my wasted time," letting them echo in his mind. He knew Emily often spoke without thinking, but this time she had crossed into a territory he understood far better than she did: tax law. Jonathan wasn't a tax expert, but his closest friend, Mark, had been a CPA for nearly 15 years. So Jonathan picked up his phone, took a screenshot of the message, and sent it to Mark with a simple caption: "Does this mean what I think it means?" Mark called back within seconds, his voice already carrying a stunned laugh. "Dude, if she's labeling the ring as payment, that's taxable income. Legitimately. She just turned a gift into compensation." Jonathan blinked, absorbing the words. "Can I actually file it?" "You wouldn't be the one filing it," Mark said, "but you can absolutely report the transaction. And if the IRS reviews it, she'll owe taxes on the fair market value of the ring." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. So the government would basically agree with her. "Oh, absolutely," Mark replied. "She used the magic word payment, that's all they need." Jonathan wasn't angry at Emily anymore. He felt something closer to acceptance, even clarity. If she wanted to treat the ring like a paycheck, then the law would treat it like one too. He opened his laptop and searched for the original paperwork from the jeweler. Once he found the valuation documents, he sent everything to Mark for review. Mark responded quickly, attaching a drafted breakdown of the estimated tax Emily would owe, around $25,000, once both federal and state obligations were considered. Jonathan hesitated only for a moment before drafting an email to Emily. His tone was neutral. He thanked her for her honesty, acknowledged her decision to keep the ring, and informed her that, per her classification of the ring as a payment, he was required to document it for tax purposes. He attached the necessary forms, the appraisal, and the estimated tax responsibility. Then he pressed send. For a while, the house was quiet. Jonathan made himself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to let the situation settle in his mind. He wasn't trying to punish her. He was only following the logic she had created. A few hours later, his phone buzzed. Emily had read the email. Then the calls started, first one, then another, then 5 more in a row. Jonathan didn't answer any of them. He knew exactly what those calls would contain: panic, denial, bargaining. Around midnight, his phone rang again. This time, he let it play out on speaker, listening to her frantic breathing before she finally spoke. "Jonathan, what is this? What did you send me? Are you serious?" He remained calm as he explained that he was simply honoring her request and handling the ring exactly as she had defined it. On the other end of the line, Emily's voice cracked. She realized she had made a mistake so big that even an apology couldn't erase it. And Jonathan knew this was only the beginning. Emily didn't sleep the night she received Jonathan's email. The moment their midnight call ended, she launched into full-blown panic. She paced her apartment, muttering to herself, rereading the documents Jonathan had sent as if the numbers would magically change. By 2 a.m., she was calling her best friend, Jenna, sobbing so loudly that Jenna thought someone had died. When Emily explained the situation, Jenna's response was a breathless mix of outrage and disbelief. He can't do that. That has to be illegal. But Emily had no explanation for the fact that her own text message was attached to every document Jonathan sent. The evidence was her own words. Around 3 a.m., Jenna showed up at Emily's apartment with energy drinks and a wave of indignation. She snatched Emily's phone and began calling Jonathan nonstop. Jonathan didn't answer any of it. By morning, Emily involved her brother, Travis, who was in his second year of a pre-law program, and spoke as if he were already a seasoned attorney. Travis pumped himself up, rehearsing legal threats in the mirror before dialing Jonathan. Jonathan picked up this time, mostly because he was curious. What followed was 30 seconds of Travis posturing, stumbling over legal jargon, and insisting that Jonathan was committing financial coercion. Jonathan remained silent until Travis finished, then calmly said, "Did you read the message she sent me?" There was a long pause. Jonathan forwarded the screenshot to him. Travis opened it, and Jonathan heard the shift instantly. The bravado evaporated, replaced by an awkward throat clearing. I'll need to consult more sources," Travis mumbled before hanging up. Emily stared at her brother, horrified. "You said you could fix this." Travis shook his head and grabbed his keys, muttering something about too early for tax law before fleeing the apartment. By noon, Emily took her meltdown online. She posted a long, dramatic rant accusing Jonathan of weaponizing the IRS and financially abusing her. The post gained comments quickly, mostly from strangers who sympathized with her, until Jonathan's friends quietly entered the thread and dropped receipts. They didn't say a word. They simply posted the screenshot of Emily saying the ring was payment. The tone of the comment section shifted instantly. People who had defended her fell silent or deleted their comments. Others began asking uncomfortable questions Emily didn't want to answer. She took the post down within 10 minutes. But the damage was done. Her friends were confused, her online circle was whispering, and Jonathan remained entirely unbothered. His silence made Emily even angrier. She tried calling him again that afternoon, shouting the moment he answered. "You're ruining my life," she cried. Jonathan responded with the same steady calm he had from the start. "I'm not ruining anything. You defined the situation. I'm just documenting it." The quiet certainty in his voice sent Emily spiraling all over again. She hung up, threw her phone across the room, and screamed into a pillow. Every attempt to push back at Jonathan only highlighted the same horrific realization. She had trapped herself with a single careless message, and now everyone around her knew it. And she still had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Emily woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a headache that pulsed with every heartbeat. The moment she checked her phone, she saw a dozen unread messages from Jenna and 3 from her mother, all demanding to know what was going on. Before she could respond, her mother called again. Emily answered, and within 30 seconds, her mother was insisting they drive to Jonathan's workplace and settle this face-to-face. Emily didn't want to, but she was too overwhelmed to fight the suggestion. An hour later, her mother marched into Jonathan's office lobby with the confidence of someone who believed yelling loudly enough could undo tax law. She demanded to speak to him, raising her voice about harassment and emotional manipulation. Jonathan stepped out, calm and composed, holding a printed copy of the original message. He handed it to Emily's mother, pointed to the word payment, and said nothing else. Silence washed over the room. Her mother's face lost its color, and she quickly grabbed her purse and stormed out, muttering that she needed to look into this. Emily followed her, humiliated, her stomach twisting tighter with every step. Emily's financial situation began to unravel faster than she could hide it. Her rent was due in 10 days, her credit card was near its limit, and every time she opened her banking app, her stomach lurched. She tried to pretend things were normal around her coworkers, but the constant phone calls, stress headaches, and whispered arguments with Jenna made it impossible. People started noticing. Her manager pulled her aside twice, asking if she needed time off, but Emily brushed it off with shaky excuses. At home, the tension only grew worse. Her landlord texted her a reminder about her overdue utilities, and the moment Emily saw the notification, she broke down again. She blamed Jonathan for everything, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true. That single message she sent had triggered the avalanche, and now she was being crushed under it. In desperation, she turned to H&R Block, hoping that a professional tax service might find some loophole. She scheduled an appointment and showed up with a folder full of printed screenshots, emails, and scribbled notes. The tax advisor, a middle-aged woman named Donna, reviewed everything quietly. Then she looked up, folded her hands, and spoke with the careful tone used for people who are already on the edge. "Emily, I'm sorry, but once you define something as payment, especially in writing, it's treated as taxable compensation. There really isn't a way around that." Emily's heart plummeted. "But it was just a message," she whispered. Donna shook her head. "The IRS doesn't care about the context. They care about classification, and you classified the ring yourself." Emily left the appointment in tears, feeling more exposed than ever. But the worst humiliation was still ahead. A week later, Emily appeared on a daytime talk show she had contacted in hopes of telling her side. She believed that if she explained her feelings, the audience would see her as the victim. She wore her nicest outfit, rehearsed her lines, and walked onto the stage with forced confidence. The host greeted her warmly at first, letting her recount the breakup and the unfair tax bill. But everything changed the moment the host asked, "May we show the message you sent him?" Emily nodded, thinking it would make her look justified. The message appeared on the screen behind them. The audience went silent. The host turned to her with an expression that said everything. "You do understand," he said gently, "that calling it payment means you defined it as taxable income, right?" Emily froze. A few people in the audience laughed under their breath. Others whispered. The cameras zoomed in on her face, capturing every second of her realization. Emily tried to argue, but the host calmly dismantled each point she made, using her own words against her. The segment aired online within hours. Clips circulated across social media, and commenters tore into her, calling her irresponsible, petty, and clueless about basic tax rules. Emily shut off all her notifications, but the damage was already spreading. By the next morning, coworkers were whispering. A neighbor stared at her a little too long in the hallway. Even Jenna struggled to defend her publicly, because the entire world had seen the message that started everything. Emily felt her life shrinking around her, each humiliation tightening like a vice. She still believed she had hit rock bottom. But she hadn't. Not yet. Emily spent the days after the talk show incident in a fog of humiliation and panic. She barely left her apartment, ignoring texts from coworkers and letting calls from her mother go unanswered. But avoiding the world didn't stop the problem looming over her. The IRS deadline was approaching, and she still had no plan, no money, and no idea how to fix what she had caused. Eventually, Jenna convinced her to hire a real attorney. Emily met with a tax lawyer named Mr. Thornton, a calm, gray-haired man who listened patiently as she explained everything. He reviewed the documents Jonathan had sent, the screenshots, and her televised interview. By the time he finished, Emily could see the answer in his eyes before he even spoke. "Emily," he said, "I won't sugarcoat this. Legally, you're responsible for the tax obligation. Your message created the liability." Emily clutched the edge of her chair. "That can't be it. There must be something, anything." Mr. Thornton shook his head with a sympathetic sigh. "The situation is extremely straightforward. You classified the ring as income. He simply reported it." Emily felt the walls closing in. When she asked what she should do next, he advised her to immediately organize her tax filings and begin preparing payment plans. But the consultation fee alone was more than she could afford. She left his office without hearing him, convinced she could somehow handle it herself. Her decision turned out to be another disaster. Over the next 2 months, Emily attempted to complete the tax filings on her own, relying on online guides and scattered advice from friends who had no idea what they were talking about. She made errors on forms, forgot required documents, skipped important disclosures, and submitted nothing on time. Each mistake pushed her deeper into trouble without her realizing it. In June, the letter arrived. A thick, stark envelope from the IRS that made her throat close the second she saw it. She tore it open in her kitchen and sank to the floor as she read the words. Not only did she owe the full tax amount on the ring's appraised value, but she now owed penalties and interest for late filing and failure to comply. The total was even higher than what Jonathan had estimated. Emily called her mother, crying so hard she could barely speak. Her mother rushed over, sat beside her on the kitchen tile, and held her as she sobbed. When Emily finally managed to explain the letter, her mother broke down too. They both knew Emily had no savings, no assets, and no way to pay the debt in full. Her mother offered what she could, but it wasn't nearly enough. The only significant asset Emily owned was her car. 2 days later, she sold it. The buyer negotiated aggressively, knowing she was desperate, and she walked away with far less than its value. But it was the only way to make the first payment on the IRS debt before the penalties grew even worse. Jonathan heard about it indirectly, from Mark, who had seen Emily walking to the bus stop near her old car dealership. Jonathan didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, didn't feel vindicated. He simply shook his head and said the same thing he had believed from the beginning. She made her choices. I didn't do this to her. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone in her apartment that night, staring at her empty parking space, finally understanding the full weight of that one impulsive text message. Her life had changed completely, and there was no going back. Emily's life didn't stabilize quickly. Even after selling her car and making the first IRS payment, she felt as if she were constantly trying to outrun a tidal wave that had already swallowed half her world. The ring still sat on her dresser, mocking her every time she walked past it. Its sparkle no longer represented love or pride. It represented debt, humiliation, and the steep price of a single thoughtless decision. Eventually, she couldn't bear to look at it anymore. She took it to a jeweler, hoping at least to get close to its original value. But the jeweler examined it carefully, tapped on his calculator, and gave her a number that nearly made her faint. It was thousands less than Jonathan had paid. She tried 2 more shops, but each offer was worse than the last. The market didn't care about her story. It cared about what the ring was worth today. So she sold it, swallowing the loss because she needed every dollar to finish paying off the taxes and penalties. Emily walked out of the cafe feeling as if the air itself had grown heavier. She kept moving, but her footsteps felt hollow, echoing the finality of everything she had lost. She realized then that the damage she had caused was not something she could outrun, rewrite, or blame on anyone else. The truth had followed her, quiet and patient, until it finally caught up. In the weeks that followed, she tried to rebuild her routines. Work, errands, quiet evenings alone, small things that once felt ordinary now felt like reminders of how drastically her life had shifted. No more ring. No more Jonathan. No more illusions to hide behind. Just the reality she had shaped with her own choices. Jonathan never contacted her again, and she never tried to reach out. Their story had closed itself without argument or ceremony, ending not in anger but in clarity. He had found peace with someone who understood him. She was still searching for hers. With time, Emily stopped expecting dramatic turning points or sudden redemption. Instead, she focused on learning from the silence. The consequences had been harsh, but the lesson was solid. Words, once spoken or written, carry weight long after the moment has passed. And she would carry that truth with her into whatever came next.